Welcome to episode 14 of Extremely Non-Extreme, a podcast put on by principle-based politics. I am the host, Quentin Whitrock. Some of our past episodes have involved me moderating one or two or once even three guests. But today we have gone a step further and I have five guests with me. And this is a different kind of a podcast in that I have convened a focus group with five individuals who are what political pundits would call swing voters. They are people who do not vote a straight ticket. They don't always vote for the same party's candidates, and in are many ways independent about politics. And I believe these are the people who sway elections. Both parties try to court these kind of people. And so this will be instructive for anyone who is interested in winning swing votes. So I hope that the parties and future candidates are watching. The panel includes George Chanos, who lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, where he served as the state's Attorney General from 2005 to 2007. And he remains a lawyer, an author, and a businessman. Gary Russell lives in California, where he was an engineer and a Fortune 500 executive in the defense industry. Gary also has been a small business owner. Ray Lynch is an Iowa native, an early retiree, spent his highly successful career in retail store management, which caused him to live for years at a time all around the United States for well-known brands such as Target, Foot Locker, Wendy's, and he brings with him that perspective. Gary Hammer was born in South Dakota, the home of Kristi Noem. He became a school teacher and ultimately had a long career in the insurance industry, including sales management positions here where I am in Minnesota. Wayne Johnson, last but not least, is a financial planner, brings that financial perspective to us today. He lives in a key political state, Iowa, and he has also lived and worked as an engineer in California, which of course is a much different place politically. So thank you all for being with me here today, and we'll get started. I'll kick it off with this question. I know there are many voters who align with either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party and pretty much vote a straight ticket when they get into voting booths. I chose you because you're not like that. Instead of just filling in all of the D or R ovals, what has been your thought process in making voting decisions in recent years past? How have you gone about filling in your oval? Gary, why don't we start with you? Gary Russell.
Okay. Well, like a lot of people, my political leanings and thought process has changed since I was, in high school and in college, and kind of swung through from being a pretty strong Democrat on over to more of a conservative and independent. And I'm looking for normal, and we haven't had that in a long time. And just looking for, valuing both the Constitution and the office. And we seem to be swinging wildly, and I'm sure we'll get into that some more. But sensibility and leadership. And I think I can tell what good leadership looks like. You're running a very large organization, much like a company. And so those are the kinds of things I look for, and just managing the office and upholding the vows that they take.
Competence and administrative capabilities.
Yeah, I think that helps, and a lot of times governors make pretty good presidents that way because they've done it before. And at the same time, as I've kind of become more conservative over the years, it's kind of led me to be more libertarian in views. So those who are more, smaller government and getting on top of the debt would have, more more points than somebody who's looking to expand.
George Chanos, you've been a politician of sorts. And now from the other perspective, when you're the person in the voting booth, how do you go about deciding who to vote for?
Well, I would pretty much echo what Gary has said. My views have changed over time. As I've gotten older, I'm now 67, and there's a philosophy and AI scientist professor over at Stanford named Brafinson, and he says what the world needs is more self-transcendent polymaths, and I think he's right. I think that I have become more self-transcendent, meaning that I now at 67 realize it's really not about me. It's not about what I want. It's not about what I think is best. It's about what's best for the largest number of people, right? I don't believe that in a country of 340 million people who are equally divided, that anyone can lead this country successfully from the right or from the left. I think they need to lead from the center, where most of us reside. Most of us are common sense people who just want peace and prosperity. We want our children to have better lives than we did. We want all the normal things people around the world want. And I think we're looking for candidates that can give us that. We're looking for people that are intelligent. We're looking for people that are ethical. We're looking for people that are hardworking. We're looking for people that really have a commitment to public service and want to make an investment of themselves into the country as a legacy contribution, and not as a stepping stone to some financial gain. And so I really just look for ethical people, very similar to what Warren Buffett, when he looks at investments, his first, threshold requirement is integrity. If the person running that business doesn't have integrity, then he never gets to the market evaluation or the evaluation of the product. It's a no-go from the start because the person doesn't have integrity. So first and foremost, I think we need that. I think that we need to recognize that humanity, people, are profoundly interdependent with one another, that we need each other, and that the greatest, the Democrats took the stage, and I don't want to, rail on the Democrats because some of the ideas that they have are actually good ideas, but they took the stage in one of the last debates, and they all said that global warming was an existential threat, right? They all agreed global warming is an existential threat. And global warming may, in fact, be an existential threat, but I believe that the greatest existential threat facing the country and the planet today is division, ignorance and division. And so I think those are the problems that we need to tackle and that we need greater unity. So I look for politicians that can work across the aisle and that can form bridges and create progress and focus on things that matter, not focus on things that are distractions. We have way, way, way too many distractions. Russian collusion was a huge distraction. The Epstein files, even though I want them released, even though I've called for their release, and out of curiosity, I'd love to see them. And if there are prosecutions that ought to come out of them, great, then let there be prosecutions. But we have much more important things to deal with in this country. And so I'd like to see people focus on the things that are really important, right? Like healthcare and education and technology and those types of things.
Let me jump in and throw it over to Ray Lynch. Ray, you have made comments on my principle-based politics blog that indicate to me that you also have your dissatisfactions with the way the parties have conducted themselves and are maybe looking for more ethics and things like that. Tell us how you make decisions on voting.
Quentin and I actually look at the fact of looking for somebody who is in the middle, who is moderate, who believes that we have three equal branches of government, which quite honestly, we don't seem to have that at this time. For example, executive orders to me have gotten totally out of control. George Bush, Barack Obama, both in their 8 years as president, wrote each about 250 executive orders. In 10 months, Donald Trump has written 220 of them. He's making all the decisions right now, in my opinion. Whatever the Congress isn't voting on things. Perfect example was the Epstein vote today. All of a sudden on Sunday, he changes his mind and the Senate passes it 100-0 tonight.
And I noticed the House voted 427-1, whereas hundreds of those House members, until Trump said he was in favor, they were strongly opposed to the release of those files and called it a distraction and were strongly opposed. And then all of a sudden, so now they changed their mind. There can only be one reason they changed their mind. Gary Hammer, how do you make voting decisions?
Well, I think policies are important. So I'm always looking for policies I agree with. But it is that what the other two had mentioned, the other three had mentioned, it's some qualities, some characteristics. And one I look for, especially in the last, I'll say 20 years, is leadership. Are they able to lead the country and unite the country? I hate seeing this polarization that we've got going on now. It's well, it doesn't make sense to me that we have these extremes kind of driving things. But we also have leaders on both parties that kind of exaggerate those things too, and they don't try to unite, and they don't try to say, "Hey, the other side has a good idea." I mean, I haven't heard that for 15 years.
Yeah, the other side has a good idea. What a concept.
Right. Yeah. And we should look at that. We should work with that. I was just thinking, is the person civil when talking to others? Is the person presidential if we're talking about the U.S. president? And for that reason, I voted for President Trump the first two times. But this last time I asked myself those questions, I'd say no. Even though I agree with most of his policies, I can't go along with how he treats people, his actions. His communication is not very good. He wings too many things, in my opinion. And so for that reason, I voted for the Libertarian candidate, Chase Oliver, this time. And have a lot of friends say, "Boy, you wasted your vote there." Well, I don't think it's wasting a vote. I think I was hoping of sending a message along with other people. We've got to do things differently here. So,
yeah, Wayne Johnson, how do you decide what to do in the ballot, in the voting booth? And if you want to go on to the next question as part of your answer, do you vote for a candidate you like? Do you vote against a candidate you don't like? Is it all about policies? What do you do?
I guess similar to everyone else on the panel, I vote for what I call competence, but integrity is part of competence to me. You're not worth the powder it takes to blow you away if you don't have integrity. I don't care how effective you are. So those two things are welded in my mind. So I would call it competence. And the other thing is, don't try to scare me. That is, that's why, in my view, why we're divided is because the parties and the candidates that have been successful at selling fear. And I despise that. And that's my biggest fear for the country, is that we're being motivated by fear than by some kind of a shared goal. So that's how I make my choices. And then the question is, what do you vote for somebody or choose the lesser of two evils? Quentin, our social studies teacher introduced me to that concept a long, long time ago, and he used Nixon McGovern as the example. So I've been familiar with that for a long, long time, and I don't like it, but sometimes that's where you end up. Um, I look for a candidate that I can be excited for, but sometimes you got to play defense.
Well, I took that to an extreme perhaps in the last presidential election, and I don't know if any of the rest of you did, where it wasn't a question of the lesser of two evils. Was either candidate less enough that I would vote for them? And so I voted for neither of the main candidates in the presidential election. I heard one of you say you voted for the Libertarian candidate, maybe others. Who else there has found himself in a lesser of two evils situation?
Well, to me, it's almost always a lesser of two evils situation, which is why I ended up voting for Trump all three times, because Hillary Clinton, to me, is an abomination. She is the epitome of corruption in politics. Joe Biden, you know, I've met Joe Biden three times, and he's a very affable guy. I had great hope for him in the beginning. I thought that, he was the conciliator in the United States Senate for many years and was a bridge. And I thought that he might act that way as president, but I soon realized that that wasn't going to happen. So I again couldn't vote for him, even though, I had great connections to Biden. Um, uh, as I said, I've had lunch with him. I've met him privately many times, and I just couldn't stand the way he was behaving ultimately, and ended up voting against him. And then Kamala Harris was a non-starter for me. I don't think that Kamala Harris had the intellectual capacity to serve as president of the United States.
What
I
are you
think.
talking about? She's a former attorney general. I thought all former attorney generals, by definition, were brilliant.
Yeah, well, no, that's not. Apparently, it's an easier entry point in some states. Who knows? Uh, but the bottom line is, I wouldn't. I wouldn't hire Kamala Harris for anything, and certainly not for president of the United States. So I was left, and I don't, I understand the idea of sending a signal, and I respect people that, choose to do that. That's their choice. It's their vote. They get to do anything they want with it. With me, I want to use it on one of the two candidates that are going to be elected, and try to somehow swing the balance on that. And so I found myself always having to vote for Trump. Interestingly, I wrote a letter to the New York Times in 2016 when Donald Trump became the nominee and when Hillary Clinton was the nominee. And I said that it was the end of the two-party system, that these were the canaries in the coal mine, that what we were witnessing was the walking dead, because any system that delivers two candidates like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, both of which lack the moral character to serve as president of the United States, that is a canary in a coal mine. And then they went on to give us Biden and Trump, and then they went on to give us Harris and Trump. And it's a system that does not have the support of the American people. Less than 10% of the people in this country think that our political system is in great shape, that they're doing well, that these are good people, that we've got a great system. Less than 10% feel that way. So, what business do you know that has endured with that level of consumer dissatisfaction? I don't think it can continue. And I think that technology is going to offer alternatives, and that alternatives that have never existed before, like blockchain encrypted voting. And so we could move away from representative government altogether. And frankly, I think it would be a great idea, because right now what we're doing is we're sending these unqualified people to Washington to vote on our behalf on issues. They're being presented with bills, sometimes that are 5,000 pages long, sometimes the night before they're expected to vote, right? And they can't even read these bills. There is a possibility. AI is evolving very, very quickly. And there's now agentic AI, which is basically your AI agent. So I've created an agentic AI for myself. So I've downloaded all of the things that I've ever written. So the books that I've written, the hundreds of articles that I've written, I've downloaded those all into an AI with the hope that that AI can at some point come to think like I do and answer questions like I would, right? And you can train that AI. You can do things like you can, send it out to your friends and have them all ask it questions. And then you can see the questions and then you can see the answers that the AI gave. And if they're not the answers that you would have given, you can tweak that so that the next time around the AI gives an answer that is more representative of the answer you would have given, right? So you can train your AI. So I envision a day, maybe a decade from now, maybe 2 decades from now, where we move away from representative government and we have agentic AIs. Each of us has an agentic AI and it's trained and we train it. And it votes as if it was one of the representatives voting, and you get 340 or 300 400 million votes cast by these agentic AIs on issues. Should we be in Ukraine? Should US aid be giving away hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to foreign countries for X, Y, and Z? All of these decisions that are being made daily by our representatives are theoretically decisions that we could vote on together. There's a great book by James Surowiecki called The Wisdom of Crowds. And in it, he's documented that crowds make much better decisions than individuals. Quick example. I don't want to monopolize the time, but quick example. On Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you had different options. You could eliminate two of the questions and you'd increase your odds by 50% of getting the correct answer. You could call a friend, an expert, and you would increase your odds statistically by about 66% chance of getting a correct answer. Or you could poll the audience, and the answer that the audience gave invariably increased the percentage of being correct to a 90% or higher level. So crowds make better decisions than individuals. It's been proven statistically and
I know
scientifically.
that, and George, you're a lawyer too. As lawyers, we get in front of juries, and there's a strong belief that juries are much more reliable at making the right decisions than even judges might be, or arbitrators who are trained in the law. But
Right.
the common sense of jurors, I know what that's. Gary Russell, you're a deep thinker and a technology guy. Your thoughts on agentic AI?
Oh gosh, I can just hear our founding fathers debating this. I like it in terms of the tech part. What concerns me though is the ability to be persuasive and be persuaded into different thinking, George, I guess. So, Quentin knows this about me, is right now I'm pretty open to other ideas. I have friends on both sides of the debate lately, and I take it all in. I'm 66 and I don't feel like I know it all, and I'm not sure I'm ready for an AI agent to speak for me just now, because I'm still taking in arguments that are different than ones I've held before.
So
Um,
just to point to that, it wouldn't have to be on autopilot, right?
yeah,
So you could have an agentic AI with a human ultimate decision, right? So you could have your AI read the 5,000 page document, right? And then tell you what it thinks, you should vote. But ultimately the decision, the final vote could be you.
yeah, that's better yet, right? But it's an interesting idea, and yeah, sometimes our representatives who really have a tough job, trying to represent, both Washington and their constituency, and it's intriguing, but right now I still like the idea of trying to listen and be persuaded and ask questions and be curious. And we talk about divided government. I think we are definitely not there. Just my own friends and family, they have opinions and they seem to stay there. And it's really tough to move off of those opinions. I think fortunately this panel, independents, are a little bit more, maybe able to do that.
Gary Hammer, let me ask you the next question. Start with you. If you can think of the last candidate you were extremely excited to vote for and just couldn't wait to get into the voting booth to vote for that person and why. It's been a long time for me.
For me too. Yeah. Now you're talking to a guy in South Dakota, voted for George McGovern, Tom Daschle. I voted for Jimmy Carter. And the guy that came up and I read your question was Ronald Reagan. I actually got excited about voting for him. I just thought he was a leader, just those things I talked about before. He could work the other side of the aisle. He had friends on the other side of the aisle. You've probably seen some of those Tip O'Neill get-togethers that he had. And my understanding is that those two used to get together, after 5 o'clock quite often, have a drink together and just talk about things going on in their lives. So I know that's a long time ago, but I think that can be done yet today. And now it's like they don't want to talk to one another. I would like to see more of that in our politicians today. So, maybe that just Ronald Reagan caught me at the right time in my life. I was a sales manager in South Dakota. I was working with 25 independent contractors, and we were having the times of our life. Everybody was having fun, being successful. It was a great time.
Wayne Johnson, last candidate you were extremely excited to vote for.
Along with Gary, I missed voting for Ronald Reagan by 3 days the first time he ran because my birthday is right after Election Day. Um, but I completely agree with what Gary said. I'm probably about 5 years behind him because I would have been a senior in high school at that point. But I got to tell you, Barack Obama was that guy that kind of captured the imagination, was aspirational. And that year, I caucused for John McCain and still love the idea of John McCain. But as far as the ability to capture imaginations and move the center, that was something that was pretty special.
You live in Iowa, Wayne, and as a result of that, and Des Moines, Iowa, of all places, which is the political capital of the world, every presidential election year, every candidate comes to the Iowa State Fair. They come to Des Moines and meet the press, meet the people. Do any of them come across exciting in person?
Rarely. Um, and to be fair, I don't follow political rallies and see them. People, I tend to like some of those folks just by kind of the edge that they have. I was at we caucus, and I was at our local precinct, and Amy Klobuchar walked in. She's short on TV. She's even shorter in person. But she's got some gravity to her and she's got some edge to her, and she's never going to get elected because I think that we're not ready for a woman that's got that kind of edges. As an example. And when they're in Iowa, they're on literally the soapbox at the state fair. So
Amy, by the way, Amy used to be a partner at the same law firm at which I was a partner at the same time.
Yeah.
And I could tell you some stories about Amy, but I'll pass
I have
on
no
that
doubt.
for right now. Anybody else want to tell me who's the last candidate you were extremely excited to vote for?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. My very first election, you guys were talking about Reagan. I was excited about John Anderson at the time. What did he get, like 7%, which was, I don't know, that was big in the day.
It's still the
And
most any independent candidate has gotten in
yeah, Russ,
It would have swung most elections.
it could, yeah, very well. But that was my first election and an exciting one. And then later on, I would say Ron Paul, although he is a little odd at times. I thought from a libertarian standpoint, if the country could possibly go that way, I was excited about no labels for a while, and it did not materialize. Um, Someone was saying earlier that we might be at the end of the two-party system with the choices that we had. I wish, but I don't see it. I thought maybe the no labels was going to get together across the aisle. It had enough momentum from moderates on both sides, and I was disappointed to see it flame out.
here in Minnesota, we had today an independent candidate throw his hat in the ring for governor. We have a scat of people running for governor on the Republican side to take on the incumbent, the infamous Tim Walz, and former vice presidential candidate who did not help Kamala Harris's appearance of competence whatsoever. But anyway, an independent candidate trying to follow the footsteps of none other than Jesse Ventura, the former independent governor of the state of Minnesota. Gary Hammer, your thoughts on that, on the subject of independence or excited to vote for?
Mhm. No, I was happy to see him. I'd have to look into his policies a lot more. I think before I'd say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to vote for him." Uh, I guess I agree with you. I probably won't vote for Governor Walz. So it'd be interesting to see in the Republican side what happens there. And I'll keep this independent candidate in mind too. I just saw that announced this afternoon too.
Ray Lynch, you
Gary,
and
you need to do radio.
I didn't catch that all.
You need to do radio.
Oh,
You've got a great radio voice.
oh well, thank you. I've
Ray
actually been told.
Lynch, let me jump to Ray Lynch. I happen to know that we were both at the same college at the same time in my first presidential election, and you probably it was probably your first one as well. And I, like someone else just said, voted for John Anderson, perhaps as a telltale sign of things to come with me. But Ray, what what has been your level of enthusiasm to vote for anybody either then or now?
Well, I would say Ronald Reagan again too, probably mostly because it was my first election, the first time I was able to vote. A couple since then would be George Bush and Barack Obama, mostly because to me they came across as somebody who was presidential and their leadership skills seemed a whole lot better than what we have, especially today. They were somebody I could vote for, not once, but twice on both of them.
You've all talked about what you're looking for in a candidate. Let's take the converse of that. Are there deal breakers for you? In other words, if this candidate stands for X, Y, or Z, or this candidate has X, Y, or Z trait, you won't vote for them regardless of what party they represent. Wayne
Oh,
Johnson, you want to go first?
yeah. The deal breaker for me is Christian nationalists. As a Christian and as an American, I think Christian nationalists are bad for both. It's just, it's antithetical to how I believe our government should run.
I hear
Yeah,
you on that.
highly religious, wear it on your sleeve. Always talking about religion. I would not want uh, as a elected representative. I believe in a separation of church and state. And that would be a problem for me.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would have problems with the this Democratic Socialist Party we see making headways in New York,
Yeah,
Seattle, Minneapolis. There's very little I can agree with as far as their policies go.
I would agree with that. Any
Yeah.
Marxist or, Marxist leaning candidate,
Mhm.
a real problem with.
Yep.
All right. In the 2026 midterms, do you plan to vote? I'm sure there will be elections in all of your states for one office or another. In Minnesota, here, we'll have all of our state elections, plus every like there is every 2 years the U.S. House of Representatives, and we have a U.S. Senate race here in Minnesota next year as well. Do you all plan to vote?
Yeah. Yeah. In Iowa, we've got a governor's race, a Senate race, and then the other every 2 year races. So it's kind of a big year, and there are some on the Democratic side, they are skewing moderate pretty heavily in their campaigns already. So it'll be interesting to see how effective they can be.
Uh, This is a question for all of you. Not knowing yet who the parties will nominate in those elections, what would you suggest to those parties if they want your vote in your swing vote? I'm sure they do want your swing vote in the state and federal races in your jurisdiction. So we're talking not about a presidential election, but state and federal races in the midterm 2026.
To me,
I'll take a
Quentin,
shot.
oh,
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, there's been a lot of talk lately that Congress is just kind of absent, and it'd sure be nice to see it get its legs again. I think you brought up the point of how the Epstein file vote just changed overnight, and there's just example after example of that. It would be nice to see somebody break from the party and break from whoever's in the White House from time to time and do the job that they're supposed to do.
As
Um,
you mentioned the Epstein vote, and I talked about it a little bit a minute ago, but to me that is just indicative of how Donald Trump dominates politics nowadays. I bet you out of the 435 members of Congress, 430 some of them were going to vote on that. If Donald Trump didn't want the Epstein files released, they were going to vote not to release the Epstein files. If they were on the other side of that, they were going to vote to release them because he didn't want them to be released. And so, people are going by what, if you're a Democrat, whatever Trump says, you oppose it. If you're a Republican, whatever Trump says, you agree with it. What kind of a way is that to decide how to vote in my opinion? And maybe I'm naive, and maybe it's always been that way, Abe Lincoln, whatever. I saw the movie Lincoln, and I know he persuaded people how to vote. But your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I don't quite see it that way.
Tell
I,
us
I
more.
understand why you would see it that way, because it seems that way. But I think that what happens is that public sentiment, when Donald Trump changed his mind, he changed his mind because he was shown that public sentiment was overwhelmingly in favor of releasing those files. And once he realized that there was no upside in his continuing to resist that trend, then he switched. And I think that his reversal signaled to everyone else that this is something that there's no getting around. The public wants this, and anybody who stands up against this is going to have a problem getting reelected or is going to face tremendous backlash. And so people all fell in line. If he had not said that, many of the Democrats would have voted against releasing the files Many of the Republicans would have voted against releasing the files, but probably the majority of both would have been in favor of releasing the files. But it wouldn't have been anywhere near, even close to unanimous if Donald Trump had kept his mouth shut. It's not like everybody would have said no, don't release them. So he had an impact, but he didn't have a completely dispositive impact. The bigger dispositive impact was public opinion that Donald Trump was simply following. He didn't really have a change of heart. Yeah, he didn't really just all of a sudden wake up and realize, oh, hey, this is a good idea. He did this because he found that the public was overwhelmingly in favor of it. He looked at the numbers.
So to me,
He
George, that
declared
reminds
victory and
me.
walked away.
What's that?
He basically declared victory and walked away. They're doing what I told them to.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and to me, it's the old drum majorette line. When they're running you out of town, pretend it's a parade and you're the drum majorette.
Yeah, that's
And
better.
that's to me what
Yeah.
happened there.
Imagine how Marjorie, I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but imagine this poor woman comes out in favor of releasing the Epstein files, gets trashed by Donald Trump. I mean, just thoroughly trashed. And less than a week later, he agrees with her position, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's,
After he's drummed up a primary against her, and same with Lauren Boebert, and he's just
yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay.
Quentin, you raised a real issue is the primaries because that lets each party go out to their wings to get your candidate, where you end up with people on so far on each side that you end up too frequently with the lesser of two evils then.
This
Um,
is this is the big problem in American government is
yeah,
gerrymandering.
yeah,
Gerrymandering and primaries,
yeah,
right? The gerrymanderings are structured so that you cannot win in a certain district unless you're a Democrat. And so everyone in that district is a Democrat, 95% of them. So you have to, be very left of center in your views to get elected in that district, right? If the gerrymandering districts were split 50-50 between Republicans and Democrats, then you would have to be a moderate to
yes,
get elected in that district. So we've allowed the two parties through gerrymandering to create a system that locks in the two-party system. And you can't run in a Republican district that's 95% Republican and be a centrist. You can't run in a 95% Democrat district and be a centrist. And what the country needs is centrists. But all the districts are drawn to favor extremists, and that's why we have extremists.
Even
yeah,
in my district, in which I ran for Congress last year as a Republican, you talk about the primary. I did even worse as a centrist in the caucus and convention system, in which the Republican Party endorses a candidate who typically then wins the primary. And people tell me afterwards, you should have just gone directly to the primary because even that draws a broader group of voters. And in the caucus and convention system, it's just designed to get the votes of the biggest political activists with the strongest left or right viewpoints.
mhm.
So I don't know how we get our way out of that. I know there's a movement in Minnesota to do away with the caucuses and conventions and go directly to primaries on the theory that those would be less likely to draw extremist candidates.
We should do
Well,
away
and then
with
Maine's been
primaries.
using. I'm sorry. Go ahead, George.
We should do away with primaries. We should do away with this whole, gerrymandering, locked in two-party system. Even if you got rid of caucuses, you'd still have primaries, and the primaries are the same toxic, environment in which a centrist can't swim.
So
Well, then
then,
if you get rid of primaries, then you go to multi-voting, the way Maine has. That's the way that you can use a multi-candidate format and get to a centrist result.
well, even Texas in their 18th district uh, U.S. Congress seat last week had multiple candidates on the ballot, and then there would be a runoff of the top two
Mhm.
Right.
on the ballot. And other places have that as well.
Yeah, some places have ranked voting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
that,
multi-voting. That's what I meant.
yeah.
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 Ray Lynch, you look like you had something to add.
I did. I think it's going to be very interesting. I see that a federal court today put an end to Texas's new gerrymandering districts, and it's going to the Supreme Court now. To me, it's going to be very interesting to see how they react to that.
And
Yeah,
the Justice Department is challenging California's gerrymandering.
but not Texas's. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're our independent Justice Department. Uh, how optimistic are you all that you'll see candidate choices that excite you in the 2026 midterms or looking ahead to the 2028 presidential election? Does anybody think that better times are ahead?
No,
28.
unfortunately. I mean, I like to be an optimist, but based on the wild swings that I've been seeing, I don't see it. And I really want to be wrong. So I talked earlier about being persuasive or persuaded. Please persuade me I'm wrong on this.
I've been somewhat impressed with Vance. And I think that he might make a credible candidate in 2028. Excited is a adjective I wouldn't use necessarily, right? To describe my feelings. I'm cautiously optimistic that Vance might prove to be a credible candidate. He's a Yale Law School grad. He's an intelligent man. His wife is arguably more intelligent than he is, and so they're two very smart people. He has a good set of values. He's not he didn't come from wealth. He came from difficult circumstances, so he understands what it means to live through difficult circumstances.
Maybe
Uh,
he should have written a book about that.
yeah, 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 yeah. He
The-
also he
Maybe
also
get a
was
movie.
he also was very critical of Trump, right? Early on, he was very critical of him, which I think actually kind of speaks highly about Trump. There are many, many things that are bad about the man, right? He's got a horrible character, and he says some really obnoxious things. We could spend hours talking about all of his failings, but he also has a few good qualities. One of them is an ability to pick a guy like J.D. Vance, who said all these bad things about him, right, as his vice president. That's not the vice president that Kamala picked, right? Kamala picked a weak vice president, right? A very weak vice president. Most, George Bush and the senior George Bush and Dan Quayle,
well,
right? A lot of these guys pick weak, Barack Obama and Biden, right? They pick weak second vice presidents. And so Trump, I think, deserves some credit for picking Vance. Um, he's done some other things that are out of character, that show a reasonableness. Uh, our Robert RFK Jr., right? Tulsi Gabbard. These are not people who were fans of his, right? But he brought them into his cabinet. Um, So
I
there's,
can hear my left-wing friends
Yeah.
throwing up right now in the background. I had one tell me yesterday that her biggest fear is J.D. Vance because he is Trump, except smart and well-spoken. And
yeah.
I know she's not the only one that feels that way. For the exact same reasons you're enthused about Vance, she's sickened about the possibility of Vance.
I wouldn't say second, but the issue I've got with Vance, and by the way, I thought his book was brilliant. I agreed with all of it, and then the conclusions he drew from it for policy purposes in my view, became entirely self-interested and cynical, and but he is smart, he is polished, and I think and again, back to the Christian nationalists, he appeals to them, and I don't want them to have influence.
Ray Lynch, you are an Iowan, and all the people in high office in Iowa are not running for reelection, even though they could. Your governor is not running for reelection. Your U.S. Senator Joni Ernst is not running for reelection. What is your level of optimism that Iowa will come up with decent candidates?
I think Iowa will come up with decent candidates, but I really can see two of our four congressional districts swinging the other direction
Yeah.
next year. It's the two southern ones. They've been close the last few elections, and I think we're ready for a change. On the Senate side, depends who the Democrats come up with. Ashley Henson, if she is determined to run, I think can be beat, but she'll also have a lot of money behind her. I mean, when you have a state that's so dominated by the Republicans right now, I mean, Charles City, where I'm at, is over 70% Republican. Believe me, Donald Trump is loved here.
Well, the county I come from in Iowa is 85% Republican, and Donald Trump is loved there too. I think we should wrap up here unless someone has something they were dying to say that haven't had a chance to say yet. I can close us off. Thank you all for joining Extremely Non-Extreme. You can sign up for this. If you just found us on the internet, you can sign up at principlebasedpolitics.org. There's a sign-up sheet for all of our blogs and podcasts right on the homepage of the website. I'll be back with episode number 15 shortly, and I'll have a blog post coming out in a week or so as well that'll touch on some of the same subjects. I want to thank all of the guests here today. You were wonderful. This went exactly how I hoped it would, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for agreeing to be on this podcast. I'm sure the people have enjoyed it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Clint.
you.
Thanks all.
all
Good to meet
right.
you all.
Thank you.
Take care.